Hey, what's going on, everybody? So today I'm going to be working on a set of coasters, trying out Rockler's new epoxy coaster jig. I'm not sponsored by them, but just a product I want to try since I do a bit of epoxy work. And the cool thing is it's already embedded in here, but there's a little groove that runs around here, so that way when you pop these coasters out, they're going to be actually upside down, and it'll capture water as it tries to run off the coaster, so that way it doesn't get all over your table. So the way that these are going to be built is I'm going to use a piece of walnut that's going to go across the top, and then it's going to be layered with clear epoxy, some 9mm shells, some coffee beans, and then it's going to have a white pigment to it. So if you want to see how I make them, stick around and you should give it a try. It's a lot of fun. So first thing, you want to make sure that whatever wood you're going to use, make sure that you run through a planer or use a bandsaw or cut it down however you want to. Just make sure the depth of it fits inside your coaster or however deep you want it. So I'm pretty much maxing these out. So this piece of wood is right around a 1/2 inch. So once I put my clear coat in, it'll sit right on top of that, and then it'll be enough so that way when I fill the rest of it up, it'll basically come up flush to the bottom of this. So once I've got those figured out, and remember we're putting these upside down, so I always flip my growth ring so that way the cup is actually facing towards the bottom. So in this case, we're going to put them in here so they're like this when they finally set in. Once you've got your pieces of wood, then you're going to go ahead and have to sand down the corners to a rounded profile, so that way it'll fit properly inside here since they're not squared off. There's really not a great way to do it. So what I came up with is I just tried a couple different methods on the my sander, and I got one close enough, so I just kept testing as I went along. So that way when I actually set it in here, it sets in there pretty close to being right on that edge. And this is basically going to be my template, so I'll trace this rounded edge onto all my other pieces so I can go ahead and sand them down to get an even sanded profile. Because once you pop these out and they're all done, you're going to go through and sand it down anyway, just to make sure there's no rough edges from the epoxy, and that'll clean up just fine. So now I'm just going to use my template, get my edges lined up, and then just trace it off, and then do the same to the opposite side. And now I've got my marks. So I'm getting ready to go ahead and pour that first level of clear coat inside each one of them, and I'm going to pour it just so that way it comes up over this mark, so that way it's a flat surface when I put my piece of walnut and the rest of my beans and coffee beans and 9mm casings in there. But before you pour, even though you're still pouring in this, you want to make sure your piece is level. So to help with that, I put a piece of pine underneath it that I know is level, it's flat. I'm just going to go ahead and double check, and it's level this way, and you want to check it this way as well. Make sure it's level. Otherwise, obviously it's going to pull one way or the other, and you're not going to have a flat surface to work with. So we're going to go ahead and mix up a little bit of our epoxy, and then we'll go ahead and pour our first layer of clear. So for this, I'm using super clear epoxies. Super clear, it's a tabletop epoxy. You can only really pour it in 1/4 inch increments at a time. Otherwise you'll have issues with it, so it's perfect for this, and it's a 1-to-1 mixture of the epoxy and the activator. And I just use these measuring cups from Home Depot. I've always used them, they're great. When the epoxy cures and hardens and you pour it out, you can actually pop the inside piece out and reuse the cup. So I try to use them as much as possible. I'm only going to pour up to here the 1-in-1 mixture. I don't need a whole lot, just enough to clear that line. All right, I think we're good there. We're gonna let it sit for a minute, and then I'll go ahead and hit it with a hot gun or a torch, and I get some of the larger bubbles off it, and then let it sit so it doesn't overheat. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and while the epoxy is still doing its thing, I'm gonna go ahead and set my piece of walnut in here as well. The nice thing about this rubber is if you get your pieces just the right size as far as your wood goes, it's almost like a clamp, because the wood will normally float in epoxy, but since I've got it a pretty good tight fit in here, it's holding it where it needs to be. So this way it should be completely fine, and we'll go ahead and let it do its thing. So as you can see here, I've already got the 9mm casings and the coffee beans inlaid. I waited till the epoxy started to harden, so that way it wouldn't move when I get ready to pour this next layer of white over top of it to get the effect that I'm looking for. So I've already got the epoxy poured. I just need to go ahead and throw some white in there, and then we'll get going. And if you're doing this for the first time, you really don't need to use a whole lot of pigment. A lot goes, or a little bit goes a long way. Popsicle sticks actually work the best for scraping these cups out. I'm actually going to mix up just a little bit more so that way I can level it off. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Now we just got to wait till it dries and we'll pop it out and finish it up.